This video is for any business leader or learning leader who wants to maximize your training resources, but is good for anybody who is a self-learner. So while yesterday's episode was about consistent, effortful use of your brain to sort of train up your muscles, to train your brain to be stronger as such as a general processor, to upgrade your hardware, and or your cardiovascular capacity, if you want to call it that. It's analogous to that. Today is about learning specific, discrete, overt knowledge. That is, you're studying something, you're trying to learn something. And this shouldn't take a lot of repetition if we're talking about knowledge. If we're talking about a physical activity, the repetition is fundamentally of a different kind, in that if you have to repeat something a lot, that is knowledge, then you're doing it in a way that is very ineffective. It shouldn't take you many repetitions. You want to use a spaced repetition system, which I will talk about in another video. So every student, especially me as somebody with ADHD, was often told, pay attention by your teacher. Yeah, it's true. But the attention isn't what happens on the outside of your brain. We can look like we're paying attention, but you can be thinking about puppy dogs or what you're doing after. That does nothing. So though we can't control, especially when we are in a teaching position or we're teaching others, we can only control this for ourselves, but that doesn't mean you can't teach, inspire, others who are your students or that are learning in your organization how to do this to maximize their learning time. This actually means they will learn faster and probably spend less time learning rather than paying half-assed attention and learning poorly and needing to repeat it probably several times, which actually winds up being more learning time, not less. So there's a famous neuroscience experiment, and what they did is they taught a cat. They had paired the ringing of a bell with food, just like with Pavlov, except this was a little different because what they did after that is they made the cat hungry. They didn't feed it for a day or two. I know that's not cool. I agree. But that's what they did. They made the cat hungry. They connected some electrodes into its brain so that they could actually see whether the cat could hear the bell. They wanted to measure whether the cat could hear the bell because they didn't know for certain it could, because they noticed if they made it hungry enough, showed it some live food on the other side of a transparent barrier, a clear piece of glass or something, that the cat would be so paying attention to that live, natural kind of food that it evolved to pay attention to, that the ringing of the bell, it didn't even respond to, even if it meant guaranteed food. It wasn't like ring, ring, oh, there's food, forget the mouse. That's not what happened. So they wanted to see, is the cat or the cat's brain hearing the ringing of the bell, or is that entire signal being lost as a result of what the cat is doing, where it's putting its attention? Turns out the cat heard the ringing, and the cat's brain heard the ringing perfectly well, but it was so paying attention to the mouse that it did nothing. It didn't respond. It was essentially inattentionally deaf. So usually we think it's obvious when we're paying attention or we're not paying attention. Well, sure, if you're just like this and doing this, maybe, but it has a great deal more to do with what's going on the inside of your brain. The part that nobody can observe and nobody can control except ourselves. But of course, we can do it ourselves, and we can train others to do it to maximize their learning efficiency. So if you're thinking about something else rather than the topic you are striving to pay attention to if you're learning, or your students should be paying attention to while they're learning, that can reduce what you learn between a little bit. That is, you're kind of splitting your attention, which means you're actually task switching, paying attention to one thing and then another, to if you put deep attention back into your brain, but not on what's being said or what's being shown or whatever the learning mode is, then you could actually reduce the total learning you receive to 0. Now you can skip the pseudoscience of, oh, but I'm learning it subconsciously. It's like, great. How do you use math, or how do you use any skill which you need to have access to consciously if it's subconscious? And chances are it's not there at all. Did your brain see it? Yes, it did. If you can't access it, even if it does have it in the back of your mind, it doesn't matter because you have no access to it. You can't use it. So it's inaccessible knowledge if it exists at all. So it's essentially, if you're listening, it could be like you never heard at all, like reading a book and listening to a book, a different book, or listening to a book and reading a book. Or sorry, yeah, that's the same thing. Okay. But the point is there, we can only do one thing fully engaged and make it effective, especially when it comes to learning conscious mental skills or conscious mental knowledge. I really learned this because I listened to all my books. And when I started doing this about 5 years ago, I noticed that what happened is sometimes I would get into this, I would get so fascinated with the book, I would go down my own mental rabbit hole about something that we just said. It's like, that's amazing, the potential of that. Or, hey, I know a way I could use that creatively to do something else. And while I was thinking about that, moments later, or maybe minutes later, because I lost track of time, it was like, hold on, what are they talking about? It was like I couldn't hear for that period of time, though I heard all of it. I knew I was still listening. I didn't go deaf, but I wasn't able to access anything that was just said. So we can call that inattentional deafness. Now, there's a very famous experiment. I'll put a link right there for it, in which 50% of people who watch this video experience inattentional blindness. That is, there is information that their eyes see, but their attention is so focused on something else that they effectively are not aware of it. So this works anytime your mind wanders. So whether it's a book or a video or any kind of learning you're doing, if you're not paying complete attention, I know it's like, this is obvious, right? But is it? We're listening to music, we're checking our email. You can do that, but you're pretty much wasting your time. You're doing multiple separate things and all of them poorly. So simply put, anything you do with less than full mindful awareness is something that is basically wasted or lost, to the point that you could actually achieve 0 learning efficiency. That is, you learn nothing because you missed everything that you were listening to, or everything that you were reading because you were listening or paying attention to something else. And that could just be your own internal thoughts. Remember, that's not just from the outside. In fact, that's oftentimes from the inside. So maximal learning occurs when you have full, attentive, mindful state. And it is absolutely akin to mindfulness meditation. So if your mind wanders, you got to do the same thing as mindfulness meditation. And what that is, very simply, is, oh, my mind has wandered away from what I'm paying attention to, or my mind has wandered away from being empty, which is your focus in that case. All you want to do is gently, kindly, and without judgment, bring your attention back. If you get upset, if you get annoyed, that will now grab your attention and still rob you of the attention that you need to pay attention to what you're trying to learn. So one last thing here is that tomorrow I will talk about 3 simple techniques for checking your understanding and entrenching your memory for what you learn. My name is Tim B. Green. This is Crush It Club 143. Bye for now.